Oh my god, they actually didn't know. They actually didn't know about imperm column. Alright, imperm column. Never play around it, kids. You always play directly into the imperm column to bait out your opponent from playing the game. Oh, play more into the imperm column, sure. They just gave up, right? They didn't make the blunder twice. Like, they just completely gave up on life. Right? Oh my god, the quality of matches today is so low! I can't get a recording! Because imperming a Dragon Maid player basically just ruins their whole day. They always have the hospitality, man. They are amazing at this game. Hitting you back with a Max C, though. Show me what you got. Actually, show me what I got in my deck. I'd like to see that, please. Thank you. Jackal Bolin's effect. Oh, wow, you played it. I'm so bad at this game. I don't know who to be more mad at. Them for playing into imperm column, or me for... Why is this the second time this happened today? Or me for maxing the card in the imperm column. Who's the real moron at the end of the day? Okay, now they've just given up on life. Now they've just lost all hope. Please. I can't get a single good match, please. There is a fifth realm beyond that which is known to duelists. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between meta and garbage, between floodgates and negates, and it lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his ability to read cards. This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area in which we call Ladder Hell. Creatures of the night, welcome to vampires. Now, vampires is another one of those archetypes that I really like. My intention when I first started playing Yu-Gi-Oh was to build vampires. I ran along and bought a box of Dark Saviors. Now, when I bought Dark Saviors, sadly, I pulled almost no vampires, and I pulled a bunch of Sky Strikers, and, well, the rest is history. But still, it's an archetype I was really excited, and it's one of the ones I've been messing around with the longest. Vampires, Dark Magician Girls, and Sky Strikers are the decks I've been playing the longest when it comes to Yu-Gi-Ohs. And luckily, I'm a huge horror nerd, so I've messed around a lot with this deck. I'm not sure if you could tell from the Nightmare Before Christmas, Dead by Daylight, Bride of Frankenstein, Black Candles, Trick or Treat, all in my backdrop every single video. So I've spent a lot of time with this deck, I've spent a lot of messing around, and while this deck isn't competitive, it is a lot of fun, and it could definitely get a lot of wins if you play well and you know what you're doing. And this is the deck list that I've ultimately come to that I think functions the best, at least without the Master Duel support that we'll be getting in the future that's currently out in the TCG and not in Master Duel. I'll be doing a physical deck profile with that, with a full pricing guide. This deck's actually extremely budget in real life, even with all the new support. You could get this deck for dirt cheap in real life with maybe a few cuts. When I eventually make that video, I'll have it linked up here above, but again, it's not going to release at the time of this video, so sorry if you're looking forward to that. But let me know if you want to see that, and I'll get it out even faster, because right now I'm probably going to wait a minute before I make that. Anyways, I'm going to stop wasting time, and I'm going to get down to the card by card. Again, as always, timestamps down below. Be sure to tell me what you think. Kicking it off with this deck profile, we're starting off with 3 copies of Vampire Familiar. Vampire Familiar is a very helpful card in this archetype. All of your Vampire cards basically want to be in the graveyard for the larger part of the game, because they get very beneficial as a effect. This card can, when special summoned from the graveyard by discarding a vampire, will allow you to search any vampire monster in your deck, so really good for getting your engine off, and really useful with cards like Vampire Domain, which lets us summon multiple times. Next up, we run 2 copies of Glow of Bloom. Again, you might not like the zombie engine, but this deck definitely needs the zombie engine to function. 2 copies of Glow of Bloom. Now again, you might not like the zombie engine, but this zombie engine is absolutely crucial to making this deck functional. I've cut down the zombie engine as small as humanly possible for this deck to make it still function while getting the power boost that it gets from it. Glow of Bloom is really helpful because when you have Zombie World on the field and this is sent to the graveyard, you could just banish it to summon out any level 5 or higher zombie monster, which lets us summon our vampire monsters really easily, but also just allows us quick access to Doom King Baldarok. Then we have 3 copies of Maxi. Maxi is the best hand trap in the game. Every deck should be running it at 3 if you could afford to fit it in. Next we have 3 copies of Vampire Retainer. Much like Vampire Familiar, this card has the same effect, but this one searches out a spell or trap. Getting the spell or traps are extremely valuable in this deck, mostly because you could bounce between Vampire Familiar Familiar and Vampire Retainer, and typically you're going to be searching either your double summon in Vampire Domain or Vampire Domination for the counter spell with this card. Next up, we run 3 copies of Unizombie. Unizombie is extremely valuable because, again, vampires really want to send their cards to the graveyard. Issue is, vampires actually struggle sending their cards to the graveyard, which is absolutely hilarious. Never seen an archetype really just struggle to get rid of their cards, but sure. Anyways, Unizombies, both effects are extremely valuable in this deck, both sending from hand and sending from the deck. You get 2 free discard fodders, which is absolutely humongous, and Unizombie is just a really good, generically good card, because it can send cards like Familiar, Retainer, and Necroworld Banshee to the graveyard. Next up, we run 2 copies of Ash Blossom. We are running a bit of the rogue list hand trap lineup, which means 2, 2, and 2. Luckily, we could just manage to fit in 3 maxis. Ash Blossom is an extremely good card, and you should be running it in basically every deck as well. 1 copy of Mizuki. Again, Mizuki is a really valuable card because you can and just special summon anything back. This is really easy access to your boss monsters, but let's be honest, most of the time you're going to be summoning Unizombie off of Mizuki. When people see cards like Mizuki, they typically say, shouldn't you be running a 60-card grass list and you could just up the number of like Mizukis and Gozuki? Honestly, this deck really just doesn't work that well with grass. You don't already struggle with consistency. Trying to bank on finding the grass is kind of annoying because then you really need to wash out the vampires and just run a ton more zombies, and at that point, why are you even playing vampires anymore? 1 copy of Gozuki, again, even more good zombie synergy. This is just a watered down Unizombie. Honestly, if you really feel like it, run 2 Gozukis and cut the Red Baron, but again, I'm just trying to keep it more vampire themed. Gozuki lets you send something from the deck to the graveyard, and then once it goes to the graveyard, you could special something from hand, which is really, really powerful. Then we run 1 copy of Necroworld Banshee. Necroworld Banshee is absolutely essential. She basically just is an extra copy of Zombie World, and getting out Zombie World is so important in this deck because it's a floodgate that doesn't interact with you since you're already playing all zombies, and it even helps you really because it makes it easier to go into your Link monsters. Again, just a nice discard option off of Unizombie or Gozuki, and it lets you set up your zombie world even faster. Next up, we run 1 copy of Shadow Vampire. Shadow Vampire, well, it's a really cool card. This card really is only useful going first. Shadow Vampire can special summon out any vampire from your deck, which is really strong, but it'll be the only card that can attack that turn, so be very careful for that. Don't lock yourself out of killing your opponent by summoning this going second. Anyway, Shadow Vampire, really good for setting up extensive plays on turn 1. It might cost you the battle phase, but again, setting up your board is... but it's a very strong tool to setting up your board. Next up, we run 1 copy of Froylan. Froylan is probably the best vampire monster in the deck. She's basically a battle trap that lets you special summon itself from hand when an attack is declared, and then you could pay life points to increase your vampire monster's attack. And now, while that could get heavy on the price point life point value, Vampire Domain synergizes with it because when a vampire monster deals damage, you gain life points back. Then we run 1 copy of Vampire Grace. Vampire Grace is a really good card in the graveyard because when a level 5 or higher zombie monster is summoned, you can pay 2,000 life points to summon her out and makes it easy to access XZ plays. Then we have 2 copies of Scarlet Scourge. This is probably the second best vampire. You pay 1,000 life points and bring back any vampire from the graveyard. Again, while it's very tempting to bring out your boss monsters, a lot of times it's just indispensable to bring back cards like Retainer or Familiar and get their effects in order to draw a card. Then we run 1 copy of Red Baron. Red Baron is just a really cool card. I absolutely love the card art for this card. You can pay 1,000 to basically creature swap your card with your opponent, and oftentimes, you'll be surprised how many times I've had it come up where I give my opponent a Vampire Familiar or a Vampire Retainer, and I take their access code or something crazy like that. Then we run 1 copy of Vampire Vamp. Vampire Vamp's effect really is not that good, but what's important about her is that she is a level 7. Now, being a level 7 means since this deck has very strong ability to contribute your opponent's monsters, which is why the deck's called Kaijus, you mean vampires, it's a really easy way to get rid of 2 of your opponent's monsters very quickly because again, you could just search her off of a card like Familiar, and then they're down 2 monsters, and tributing is one of the strongest forms of removal in the game. Then we have 1 copy of Jack-O-Bolin. Jack-O-Bolin's really good because it lets you get rid of a card from hand, and again, it's really important to send your cards to the graveyard. Not only that though, every single one of your opponent's turns, Jack-O-Bolin is essentially a monster reborn. Just be wary though, that Jack-O-Bolin, whatever it resummons, will be banished once it leaves the field again, so be very careful to not summon something really important that you want to get back later. Next up, we run 1 King of Doom King Baldarok. Baldarok is the best card in the deck, and it sucks to say it, but vampires really need their own dedicated boss monster like Baldarok that they can easily get on the field. Baldarok gives you 2 very strong effects if Zombie World is up, which allows you to negate an enemy monster's effect which gives you access to a negate and a banish if a zombie monster activates an effect. And because of zombie world, everything on field and in graveyard is going to be a zombie monster, along with all your cards already being zombie monsters. Baldarok's extremely valuable not only for that bit, because it resummons itself if there is a field spell on the field. Doesn't even have to be yours, could be your opponent's, which synergizes really well with Vampire Sucker and lets you draw a card. Next up, we have one copy of Foolish Burial. Foolish Burial is an insane extender in this deck, and this card is absolutely mandatory in the deck. You can't play the deck without it. Then we have one copy of Terraforming, just to search out the zombie world. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to find your zombie world early. Then we run one copy of 1-for-1, again allowing us to discard a card and set up our graveyard. Not only that, but it's a really easy way to special out a card like Vampire Familiar, and since this does special summon, Vampire Familiar's effect will go off immediately. If you have Zombie World already set up though, you probably want to go for Glow Up Bloom. 3 copies of Zombie World, again, I really can't exaggerate, it's just so important to see Zombie World. If you don't see Zombie World, you're going to be fighting an uphill battle, but luckily it's really easy and really consistent to get to this card. 3 copies of Vampire Domain, this is double summon for the archetype by paying 500 life points, and it's a continuous spell so it stays on the field. Not only that, it lets you recover life points in a really nice and neat way by attacking with your vampire monsters as long as you do damage, and it gives you something to discard with Vampire Familiar or Vampire Retainer, since this effect still applies even if it leaves the field. So sometimes you just activate this and then you give it up to special summon back from the graveyard. Then we run 2 copies of Infinite Impermanence, again just to run a variety of hand traps so we don't auto lose going second, and then 1 copy of Vampire Domination. This is an insanely powerful counter trap. All you need to do is control a vampire, and then you can negate any monster effect, spell, or trap, and if you get a monster, you can even gain life points equal to its attack value. The only reason we run it at a 1 is because it is searchable and we don't want to break on it. Now we'll move on to the extra deck. Now, if you're getting priced out by the deck and you're intimidated by how many URs there are in it, most of the extra deck is cuttable. The main deck is very important at the ratios they're at, but you can't afford to cut down the extra deck because the majority of it doesn't come up very often, and even though I think it'll hurt the deck a little bit, this deck very much still is playable without the majority of the extra deck. The cards that you cannot cut and you must absolutely run though to have success with this deck is Linkuriboh, Halki Firebrax, 2 Vampire Suckers, an Avendread Savior, and 1 copy of the like and subscribe button. You definitely will not be having a good time playing this deck if you don't go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button in the deck. It's just absolutely essential. I don't know what to tell you. Anyways, right back to the deck profile. Going on to the extra deck, again, most of the extra deck is cuttable. If you're intimidated by the price of this deck, you could basically cut the entire extra deck. You only really need 5 cards. But giving you the card by card for everything and why I choose to run it, we have Cyframe Lord, Omega, and Savage Dragon because it's really easy to get out level 8s because Unizombie modifies his own level, so typically this is a level 5. And if not, you typically get out cards like Jack O'Bolin with a Glow Up Bloom pretty consistently on the field on the same time, so it's just an easy thing to climb into, especially for those long grind games. Just make sure you have a Link monster already in the graveyard if you're going to make Savage, which you typically do because you tend to link off Sucker into Sucker a lot. Then we run 1 copy of Strike Bouncer. Again, not at all mandatory, but it is a nice extra monster negation because you pump out level 6s pretty easily. Then we have 1 copy of number 24, Dracula the Vampiric. Not a vampire, by the way. This doesn't have vampire synergy. This is vampiric, not vampire. It really sucks that this isn't vampire support because this is honestly better than Sheridan, but it is a Book of Moon effect and it resummons itself, and both those effects are very valuable in vampires. Then we run 1 copy of Sheridan. This is just a removal. It's not the best card in the world, but it is vampire synergy, so it's a really nice card to have and it's pretty easy to make, especially because it's effect, because it can just use any of your opponent's monsters that you end up stealing as any level. Then we run 1 copy of Divine Arsenal Zeus, just because run the XZ. Zeus lets you win games that you have no business winning, and it's a great comeback tool. 1 copy of Linkuriboh. This is probably the second most important monster in the extra deck. Linkuriboh is just a really easy way to link off Vampire Familiar and Glow Up Bloom in order to fix any brick hands you might have. It's a really great card because its effect works from the graveyard as well, so we only need to run 1. 1 copy of Halki Firebrax. Halki Firebrax is just an insane card for making extensions. If you set up Zombie World already, go ahead and summon yourself out a Glow Up Bloom and then make a Linkuriboh and you get your Baldarok out. And if not, you could go ahead and summon out something like Familiar, which you typically don't want to do because Halki will negate its effect, but sometimes you could just do that to get it in the graveyard and then use its graveyard effect to summon it and then get the effect that way. 1 copy of Phoenix, just generic spell and trap removal, really good. 2 copies of Vampire Sucker. This is the best vampire card ever printed, and it's one of the only good vampire cards like ever printed. This card is just so insanely good. This card lets you tribute your opponent's monsters, and it's so easy to make in this archetype. It's why all the vampires being level 5, 6, and 7 is so good because of this card. Like, The Vampire's levels were so abysmally bad until this card came out. This lets you use your opponent's resources super easy. Not only that, it gives you a free draw every time a monster is summoned from the graveyard, which happens so often with cards like Mizuki, Baldarok, Familiar Retainer, and all that. And not only that, but if your opponent doesn't have enough monsters on the field, you could go ahead and use Vampire Sucker's effect to special summon something from the graveyard and then just use that as tribute fodder. This card is so insanely good, and not only that, but she's literally a vampire wearing Yeezys. I absolutely love the fact that she's just wearing the most pimped out J's I've ever seen in my life, and it's one of the first cards I ever pulled when I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh! My first pack, I pulled a Vampire Sucker from Dark Saviors, so I like that. Next up, we run 2 copies of Avenged Savior. Avenged Savior is just a really good because, again, with Zombie World, everything's going to end up being a zombie, and it's just an easy way to send cards like Glow Up Bloom to the graveyard and get their effects off. Then we run 1 copy of Nightmare Unicorn. Nightmare Unicorn, again, just really generic removal and good for making access code. Then 1 copy of Apollosa and 1 copy of access code. Now, these cards are very strong in the deck, and because you tend to be able to make them pretty easily in longer games especially, the thing is, you don't need these cards at all. So if you're really outpriced and intimidated, I would still sooner cut the Omega and the Savage, but you don't technically have to run these cards, but they're just so good in every single deck, and they will come up often enough that you'll miss them if you take them out. But if you really have to, cut these, but these are the better optional cards in the deck. And anyways, that is Vampires. Hopefully that helped explain some. Again, I've tweaked around a lot with this deck. It's going to be a lot stronger once the new Vampire cards come out. If you're interested in checking it out, again, I'll have linked down below the video once I eventually make it. Let me know if you want to see it sooner or not, if you're interested in buying a really cheap TCG deck. But hey, that's Vampires for now, and I'll be sure to update this once they get their support. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the gameplay. Alright, first, easiest game of my life, full combo, right off the bat, vampires, zombies, all that nonsense. Oh, actually, kind of a good hand. So we're going to go ahead and hit out and bait out the Ash Blossom with Terraforming, because players love to hit the Terraforming with Ash Blossom, because everybody plays like it's nobody's business. There it is. Why play well when you could just slam cards the second you see them on the field? Anyways, so now we're going to go ahead and actually play the game. Again, this is one of the things I described on one of my actual tutorial videos. Play the game like your opponent doesn't know how to play the game. Because most of these players, no offense, don't know how to actually play Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, they don't play this game well, so you should exploit that. And use your own good plays to win games that you have no business actually winning. Anyways, now that we have the zombie world set up, we're going to go ahead and send Glow Up Bulb to the graveyard. Glow Up Bulb is going to go ahead and proc here, which is going to allow us to summon out Doom King Baldarok to the field. Now, typically, the play I would do here... Oh, they have a card in graveyard. This works out great. So we're going to go ahead and make our Vampire Sucker here using Baldarok, because Baldarok is just going to come back anyways. So then we're going to go ahead and get ourselves a little draw this turn by summoning out their Ash Blossom to the field. This is not only going to draw us a card, second copy of Domain, but we're going to go ahead and activate Vampire's Domain now. Now, Domain is going to allow us to pay 500 life points to make a second normal summon of a vampire monster. But I don't exactly feel like using my own cards. So I'm going to use my opponent's Ash Blossom here, and I'm going to go ahead and summon out a vampire of my choice. Now, while it is very tempting to get one of my big beat sticks, like maybe get my Vampire Vamp set up, I'm actually going to go ahead and search out my Vampire Retainer. Vampire Retainer is going to go ahead and come out in defense position, but since it's special summoned, it's going to let me proc an effect. If I had more plays in hand, by the way, I would have searched out the Familiar to search a monster. Then I'm going to go ahead and grab myself a copy of Vampire's Domination. So then I'm going to go ahead and set Domination. Yeah. I'm going to pass turn here. So on the draw phase, my opponent's going to draw their card. Now on standby phase, I'm going to go ahead and get Baldarok back from the graveyard, summon to my side of the field, and it's going to give me another draw from Vampire Vamp. Draw! And I could banish something right now if I wanted. Monster card! Oh, what a beautiful, Beautiful draw. You know what? I'm just going to shotgun this Maxi as soon as I can. If I knew I was going to draw Maxi, I would have toggled this on earlier. That's why I wanted to shotgun the Maxi, to be honest. So, I had a feeling that they were going to be playing some sort of going second strategy. I couldn't toggle on fast enough. Go ahead. They're going to pop Pankratops here to destroy my zombie world. But I honestly really don't feel like getting my zombie world destroyed, so I'm going to use one of Baldurrock's 2 effects when a zombie monster activates an effect, and everything's a zombie monster right now. And I'm going to go ahead and just negate that. So everything on field and in the graveyard is a zombie monster. The only exclusion is monsters in hand, and that's why this floodgate is so nasty. And that's game, just like that. Looks like we're keeping it a short video, and that's vampires. I mean, I wasn't much of a match, but hey, it's a match. And that has been Vampires. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Again, this is a deck that I really much have a lot of love for and I've been messing around with a long time. So feel free to play around with it if you're really in love with this archetype, because this archetype is bad as hell. And I mean that in the best way possible. Like, it is, all the card arts are, not you, zombie, all the card arts are just so absolutely cool. The cards look amazing. The effects feel spectacular. Like, the horror gothic theme is just really cool because I'm a huge nerd for that kind of stuff. But I absolutely love this deck, and once the new support comes out, this deck gets so much better. Like, it's night and day. They got an in-archetype Unizombie that's better for them, and it is just absurd. This deck, I've been having so much fun playing this in the TCG right now. I've just been testing the noise out of that deck in the TCG right now, and it feels so much better to play. Again, it still lacks that final oomph of power. The deck really needs its own Baldurrock, not using the generic zombie nonsense, but it feels so good, man. Anyways, hopefully you enjoyed the deck profile. Let me know if you want to see a different deck profile for a different list in the future. I have a giant ballpark list coming out very soon, so stick around if you want to check out that. But anyways, this has been Rojas, signing out.